This last week, I went to Dallas, and for their Foundations Recovery Network deal, and I got to speak. Foundations Recovery is the organization that Calvary became a part of, and still owned by the larger parent company, Universal Health Services. And Foundations is known as one of the top organizations in the country on recovery, co-occurring conditions, cutting edge kinds of things, valuing people in their recovery as being the smart ones, and being able to understand what they're going through, where they're headed, what's going on, at the same time applying all the best evidence-based practices. And I got to tell you, it was really great to be around a lot of those people and just see the quality of the nature of the people that are involved. And when I say the quality, I don't mean the expertise. I mean people who are seemingly experts but don't treat people like they are the experts, that enjoy laughing and are grateful and are disarming and down to earth. And I had a session, they asked me to speak on spiritual anatomy of transformation that I do regularly. Some of you guys know it as body, soul, and spirit, and the circles. And so I was going to do that, and I rarely get nervous about this whole thing, but I was a little bit, And so 2 days in Dallas, first kind of mingling and networking. I got to tell you, I like hanging out with you all, but I hate networking. Does anybody not like networking? Yeah. It just feels pretentious, and it feels like every Christian church I've kind of been a part of in my life. It's got that, and you have a goal in mind. It's to meet people so that you can benefit from the connection, and so that's kind of there. But leading up to Wednesday when I spoke, I had a glitch in something that was in the big fancy brochure, and it pretty much was my picture and the name of my thing and no description and no bio. For some reason it wasn't there. So I got to know the person who can put that all in, right? And so I'm talking to her, and I'm like, boy, this is just, okay, well, we'll deal with the glitches. We sit down, she starts sharing some things about what I was going to be talking about. As she saw the description, she says, can I ask you a question? And then we go, now we're going. Now we're doing spiritual direction right there at the Ritz-Carlton. And her eyes are filling up. And she starts talking about how she was raised in a very difficult Christian, she was Southern Baptist. She was at a Southern Baptist church, and how she just wanted nothing to do with that aspect, but the pain that's going on with her. And she just started, when that conversation was coming alive, the same thing happened with another person that was working there and having that conversation, and one thing after another before even Wednesday. And then Wednesday comes around, and I'm getting ready to do my seminar, and Christy from Calvary, who went with me as my babysitter, and some of the other people from Foundations that were there to support me, and they come in there, and so half of them were people that were just there to support me, and the other half were people that actually signed up for it. So we had a total of 8 people in the room, and it was like, by all standards, it would be like, only 8 people, really? Only 8 people? But having led up to this point, it almost felt like this was secondary because of all the things that were going on. And it seemed like, okay, well, we're not going to get the body, soul, and spirit thing out to people, until the guy that heads some of this stuff up said, Henry, would you do a webinar on what you did, and we'll do it nationally. So you can get it now on December 14th at 1 o'clock. As a webinar, and I am so PowerPoint challenged, but it has to be PowerPoint. So we're actually going to have it down and documented, and it's coming right out of this, you guys. coming right out of this small community of the Wild Goose, where this has been rippling one to another and finding that transformative nature of the inner work of the Spirit that affects the soul and the body instead of the behavior of the body to try to control the feelings to get the Spirit. It's reversing that, and people are looking at this and going, never heard this kind of thing before, which is what we've been saying all along, that there's a new way and a transformative way. So it's spreading, and it's going to be out there. So all of that to say, you don't really know what's going on when it's going on. When you do life, you have a goal, you have an ambition, but you have no idea of what's happening in the periphery. You have no idea what is happening in the lives around you or in your life as you go about your business. And that goes for the good and the bad as well. You know, when I look back at my life and I look at the difficulties and the struggles at different points, and I was in it, I was overwhelmed and consumed and had difficulty breathing. Now I look back at it and I realize those were the most important, crucial times of my life. Christmas is coming. I hate to bring that up, or I'm happy to bring it up, depending on where you're at, right? Christmas is coming. And even just looking at you, I see the deep breaths because of the triggers, because of the things that occur in that. Okay, but what I want to share with you today is that this is nothing new. Back when they used the term the gospel, okay, the good news, and we talked about what good news was, and it said that Jesus preached the good news. What it was a proclamation. It was a proclamation of a truth that people didn't understand because they were living in a different truth. They were living in a truth that said that they were a culmination of their behaviors, that their identity was based upon their actions, that they were at the mercy of what others say about them. And what they referred to that was, what Jesus referred to that was the world. That's what he called the world. So he called that the kingdom of this world. All right, so the kingdom, he called it a kingdom. Well, what makes a kingdom? A kingdom is made because it has a king. All right, there is some form of authority. And at that time, the authority was referred to as Lord. Caesar is Lord. So they referred to Caesar as Lord. And in that kingdom, what they had was, they saw that there had to be a war. There had to be some type of a battle that took place. And out of that war, whoever was king, when they win, then they would have to have victory. They would have to have victory, and in order to have if they had victory, then it would lead to peace. So peace was ushered in by a battle, and whoever wins the battle is king and can stand over, like Muhammad Ali, in that picture, hovering over the victim, and I'm champion of the world, And so this carried a lot of weight. Caesar is Lord. That was what that meant. And so, and how the symbol of war, symbol of battle was a horse, coming in on a horse. But on Palm Sunday, what did Jesus ride in on? A donkey. The symbol at that time of peace was a donkey. So he reversed this. So now the new kingdom, the kingdom of God, is that if God is king here, if God is king of your life rather than something else, then how would things operate? So I don't need this pen. I have to do it right. So the kingdom of God, and so when they referred to in that period of time, Jesus is Lord. See, we get all non-denominational about it. We get all fundamentalist about it. Jesus is Lord, amen, let's put it on a bumper sticker, you know? And it's all where it goes, is Jesus is Lord. At that time, what it meant was Caesar is not. It means Caesar is not. So there is a transition going on from Caesar is Lord to nothing is Lord? No. There was a new mentor that came in. And this king did not come from the world. It came from beyond that. It came into a culture that said women and handicapped and children are just as valuable as Jews and Romans and anybody else. That is unheard of in the kingdom of that time. That is what the kingdom of heaven is. It's not the kingdom of resurrected physical bodies. It's the kingdom of heaven on earth that says we operate under a new authority and a new king. And we tell the authorities, whether they be government authorities or whatever it is, we say, I will always serve you, but you can never be my master. I will serve, but you can never be my master. I have only one master. And that is that God. And during that time, every time they wanted a king, you know what happened? When they wanted a king, they begged for a king. We want to be told what to do. We want to have law and order. We want to have rules. And God kept telling Solomon, tell him they don't need a king like that. They have a king. I am the king. And I will draw them from within themselves. But no, we have to have tangible evidence that somebody is in charge. We want a king, we want a king. And he says, fine, give them Saul. And they got Saul, and it didn't go well. That's what it's like when we try to use our ego to solve our ego's problems. The multitude of self-help books that are out there are usually coming from the ego of a person or an individual trying to help you with your ego. They're not pointing you in the direction to go. They're pointing you in the direction to look at themselves so that you will buy more books and tapes. It's a scam. It's a scam. Not all are scams, but the ones that aren't scams are the ones that have something to say that direct you to a source beyond themselves that you can tap into all the time without reading their book. But we can play the game because we want a king. We want a king who is going to tell us what to do. It just feels better to have tangible stuff and evidence. We want a king that will tell us right and wrong and black and white and heaven and hell. When we think in terms of the king of peace that says you already have and are everything you need to be, learn to live it out. What? How do I do that? How do I do that? He says, follow me. You know what I am struck by? What I am struck by in Scripture is how many times people want something fixed. And Jesus calls them into a journey. He calls them into a journey. The rich young ruler. What do I need to do to have eternal life? What do I need to do? What is the thing that is going to flip it all? We want to be told that one thing that's going to turn the course of our life around. Just tell me that one thing. Just tell me that one thing. If you will do this, God, then I will do that. And we're trying to nail the expectation that is coming down from God so that we will be good the rest of the time and we won't have to suffer in the life that we have. And God calls us into a journey, a unity, a oneness with God in the good and in the bad. And the rich young ruler says, what is the one thing that I need to do? And he says, well, if you want to go about making it about you, if you want to make it about good behavior, then sell everything you own and give it to the poor and come follow me. Naked. Completely unencumbered. And he walks away sad. You know, well, in Galatians, the same type of thing happened because the Galatians is either the first or second letter that Paul wrote to the churches. And Paul, when I read this, I kind of get the feeling Paul's kind of freaking out a little bit because he had brought this news to these different churches and started these different churches in that area of Galatia. And then somebody got a hold of them and told them there was that they weren't really all in. They were kind of in, but they weren't in because they were Gentiles. So the Jewish people were like, well, we also believe in Jesus, but you also have to keep the laws too. You have to do both. So you're not really in. So the Gentiles are like, so what is the thing that I need to do in order to really feel like I'm in? Oh, you want to feel it? Oh, we got something for you. You want to really feel it? The feeling of being in instead of just the truth that you belong? It's called circumcision. Any takers? That's what they told the Gentiles. Along with many other rules. See, when we want something tangible, that's what ends up happening. Charlotte gets it. I laugh at all the other gender in the world. Thanks a lot, Charlotte. Yeah. And these are adults that they're telling this to, by the way, not helpless, innocent little babies that can't say, "Hey, stop this! In the name of love, stop this act that's going on here." And so in that. In that desire for tangible evidence of their sense of belonging, they're given one, and now they're freaking out. They wanted a certain one. They didn't want that one. Just give me the commandment one. Don't tell me something painful like that. So Paul hears about this, and Paul's a little freaking out. Why is he freaking out? The reason why he's freaking out is because he had given them the good news of not having to meet up to the expectations anymore. He had already freed them from a life of obligation to their own way, to their old king. They had been freed by the king. So basically they're saying, how can we be free in our new king, God, who tells us that we're free, and still manage everything in our own control and kind of satisfy both? Now you can understand why Jesus said you cannot serve both God and mammon. Your own way, your own will, your own self-determination. Why? Because the ego cannot solve the problems of the ego. Only the Spirit can. And the Spirit has declared them free. So he says, however, the law is not of faith. On the contrary, who practices them. Check this out when he tells the Galatians. He said, let me go back one. He says, now that no one is justified by the law. In other words, the law is inadequate. The rules, let me put it in the context of how we're living right now. The fear that if we screw up in some way, we don't belong anymore. The fear that we're going to disappoint God. We have that because we're afraid of disappointing others and ourselves. So we project an image of God that he's Bob down the street who I don't want to disappoint. And that's not the rule of the kingdom of heaven. The rule of the kingdom of heaven is that you have inherited belongingness and a sense of identity. You have inherited it, and it can't be taken away. It belongs to you. So it says, now that one is justified by the law before God is evident, for the righteous man shall live by faith. In other words, if you want to be righteous, you have to do it believing that you're righteous even though you're not. Now let me repeat that. In order to live by faith, basically what he's saying is if you want to be righteous, you have to do it by faith, because you can't do it by doing it. By acting out acts of righteousness, you can't. But the miracle is that by faith you are declared righteous. You can't become something more than what has been declared about you. And you've been declared righteous. So he says, however, the law is not of faith. On the contrary, he who practices them shall live by them. And in other words, if you think that you want a tangible evidence or a law or the right way of doing things in one particular area, then you have now decided that you have to be perfect and do them all right. It's all or nothing. I either accept the freedom of my identity in Christ, or I have to earn it all the way. You can't do both at the same time. So it is imperative that we understand what our identity is. Before we move into the feelings in our life, they're telling us that we don't belong. This season, as we move forward, the temptation is to want to try to figure out how to get rid of the feelings, how to get rid of the triggers of past experiences around the holidays. Okay, those songs that bother us or that thrill us. Our emotions are so vulnerable to what is being said to us about our past during these periods of time. The temptation is to want to run from it, to escape from it, to not think about it. I would encourage one thing, a very radical approach. Go into it. Go into it. Go into it unflinching or flinching. However you go into it. Go into it. Feel every aspect about it. Why would I say that? Why would I say to go into it? It's because we know that avoiding it hasn't worked. It's never worked. When I try to avoid it and I can't avoid it, then I have to use a substance to make me stop thinking about it. But at some point, I'm going to wake up. Right? At some point, I'm going to wake up. So what I want to do is be led by the Spirit of truth and lead the body and its feelings from inside out. Or as Gary said to me so profoundly, it's an inside job. It's an inside job. It's you and God in a conspiracy to quiet the nature of the soul and retell your story in a new way. How would it feel down the road to look back at this Christmas and say, I remember that was the Christmas that I stopped believing the curse that was on my life. That this Christmas did not have anything to do with December 25th or the giving of gifts or the disappointments, but it was the day I was able to escape the curse that it had said about me in the past. That it was that by going into it, I was able to see that the king that I serve and follow was actually born in the wrong place, grew up in the wrong place because he was supposed to be in Bethlehem and he was actually coming from Galilee. That he was actually a shepherd, and nobody liked shepherds back then. Nobody liked shepherds. Shepherds were nasty people. They saw them as those people. They were the ones that tended the sheep that were going to be slaughtered at sacrifices. That's what Jesus was considered to be a part of. And instead, he became the sheep that was slaughtered in order for you to break the curse of whatever your triggers remind you of. Now that, my friends, is freaking good news. Is it not? Okay. Even as we sit, your soul will say, God, that feels good. But is it true? Am I going to feel this way 2 days from now? Yeah. That's the soul's work, right? Right? We're being real, huh, on that? Of course. That's where suffering happens. But the only two portals, as I've said before, the only two portals to intimacy with God is love and suffering. So the invitation is to suffering. I can't believe this room is still full because I keep drawing you and calling you to suffering. We got one dude doing the song, and the same guy does the message and serves communion, and you keep coming. What are you doing here? There's giant churches out there with awesome worship bands and people that intentionally got tattoos so they can relate to people with tattoos. And there's so much out there that is exciting. And they're so social media savvy. Well, we're getting there. But, and yet you come here. You know why? It's because, as some wise person said, religious people are trying to wait for heaven, and spiritual people have been through hell. It's because we know that the portal to intimacy with God is suffering. So in this season, bring it on. Bring it on. The child I love watching little children their first time at the beach when they feel the water and they see the wave coming in, and they're brave when the wave is half a mile out. And they're like, no, stop. And they're standing there, all of a sudden here comes the wave. Whoa! And here they go running back, right? And then they run back out there and they keep doing like this. As they get older, they find out that that's not really enjoying the water. Okay? What they do is they go behind in the shed behind them, and they rent a boogie board and they ride that sucker. Okay? This season, don't yell at the wave coming in. Ride that sucker. Look at that wave as its memory. It's the same wave that was back when you were younger. And it was the same wave that others have experienced. It's the same wave that Abraham experienced when he said, I can't do this because I can't talk. And God said, okay, take your brother. He's a better talker than you anyway. It's the same wave that was coming up when Sarah and Abraham were promised a child at 100 years old. It's the same wave of doubt that was affecting them. It's the same wave that made Jacob wrestle with an angel at night trying to get God's blessing when in actuality he already had it, and he was wrestling for what he already had, and then he ended up with a limp to talk about as a testimony. He didn't say he got anything he asked for. He just said, hey, I wrestled with God and got a limp, That's all he got out of it. Okay? He was getting something he already had. It's the same wave. You know why? Because we're connected not only to God, we're connected to this earth. And those same air molecules and ocean molecules and all those were there from the foundation of time. And I'm not saying something just philosophical. I'm saying something scientific, which is really kind of impressive when you think about me saying something like that. Is it not? Am I telling the truth on that, scientists? There isn't anything new. What it is transformed. Oh, full circle. So when we enter into this life of both love and suffering and awareness, then we look back at those things which have interfered with love and suffering and flow and freedom. And we say, you know what? Forget the curse. I'm not living under that curse anymore. I'm telling a new story with old meanings to new meanings, and we're not going to live this way this Christmas. It seems a bit early to be talking about it because I put Christmas off until the 24th. And then it hits me like I didn't know it was coming. What? I have to go where? What? I don't have a red shirt. Go to Ross. Seriously, Christmas Eve, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going through the racks, right? Looking for that Christmas shirt because I forgot I had somewhere to go, right? Or I have nowhere to go. And I was like, well, everything's a problem, right? During that time. Why do it that way this time? Why not start now, early? And start anticipating that it's going to be rough. And start thinking about how I can engage myself in this instead of running from the wave. Let's ride this sucker. Yes?
Just speaking about it, running away from it, I don't know if you remember, but our meeting at Calvary, I asked you, I said, do you really believe this shit you're telling me?
I do.
You remember that?
I do. It's true.
Oddly enough.
I mean, not the shit part, but what he said is true.
And oddly enough, that was the beginning of my new life. Because I respected you enough to believe it. I don't make your head big. but, or bigger. But it's the day.
It's
that-
okay, Bill, I can handle it. Go
Yeah,
ahead and lay it
I
on me.
know.
That's all right.
But it was the day that I came alive. For the first time in 16 years.
It's the day you realized you were alive.
Yeah, and for 16 years, I have not enjoyed one freaking Christmas. This is the first year I'm going into Christmas with my eyes wide open and my heart wide open. And I still miss them ever since my son died. But I'm doing it now.
Yes.
And it's because of you, Henry. And I know I said last week, but it is. You've helped me grow spiritually. And I don't want to lose that for anything. So I am the one that's coming into it. I've come full
I'm proud of you,
circle.
man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I thank you, thank you. I love you, man. I really do.
Thank you. I love you too, Bill.
You're talking about you went to the conference and it seemed like the actual talk was just like the icing on the cake or like everything. And I've had that experience, I guess, and I think it's helping me not get through the Christmas season, but see how it's such a beautiful experience the Christmas season because like my daughter, Ireland and I passed out these lunches to this guy for Thanksgiving, and I was looking for like to find God, like okay God, like in giving you receive, and he was this guy on the street, and he made her feel like he wanted to teach her that it's a good, like you can feel good from giving to other people, like in his circumstance, like he wanted to give, like, and wasn't looking to get anything that we had to give to him. And I had like a moment, like an experience, like I'm not articulating it well, but like I feel like Christmas has been and is the season, like isn't just that day, it's all leading up to it. And the miracles happen even before the actual day if we look for them. And that's been a beautiful thing for me because I think we put all this emphasis on the day, and really it's the whole journey of leading up to it that we find that God really blesses us.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think that's important to recognize too, because if we really are going to make it about the very literal nature of a birth on the 25th, then we're mistaken because it didn't happen on the 25th. And it was nothing like what was said. It is about the message of the journey and that aspect of it. It is, and that is powerful. It doesn't minimize what was said. It's to maximize what was meant by what was being said. And by the way, just as a tool, this isn't, I don't think we're seeing this very well, and I can't do like that because firstborns are going to freak out. But let me just tell you, if you go on the website, Water from Rock, if you go Water from Rock, you can download Tim Smith's Advent calendar and devotional. It started on the 28th, and he does one for Easter and on Christmas. And he really does a really, really good job. And I find it very simple to read, and you learn something every time because his head's like this big. It's amazing. I mean, he's just very knowledgeable. But if you want to follow through the Advent calendar with a devotional along the way, Water from Rock. Go to Water from Rock, and you can download it. And it's really, really helpful. Any other reflections? Yes, Andrea.
Just kind of jumping off what Megan was saying, last Sunday when I delivered our donations to East Colina, there was a group of about 6 children out there playing in a fenced area on the pavement. You know, that's all they have over there. And right over there, they've got all this stuff. And all these children, they're probably anywhere from 6 to 9 or 10, raced to the car. Can I help? Can I help? Can I carry that? I want that. Can I carry that? And they were almost vying for the privilege of helping. And I thought to myself, that's what the Lord says about children get it. Why can't we be more like children? Here these kids have nothing, virtually. I'm there to give our donations, but they wanted to give. That was more important to them than what was inside those bags.
Yeah.
I thought, what a lesson, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Come as little children. That's what he's talking about. Come that way. Anybody else?
I think your lesson, like, today for what you said is, like, it's a lot about identity, right? Like, and I think that if you keep your identity in mind instead of, like, your personality, you can handle things a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, this is going to probably be, like, the hardest Christmas for me in a long, long time, for sure. And, like, if I let my personality handle it, it'll go way wrong. But if I let my, like, the identity and the sense of, like, where you belong, no matter what the circumstances, I'll have a better shot.
Yeah, if you make it trying to stop the feelings that you're feeling instead of acknowledging them, you will be miserable. Because you're trying to violently rid yourself of something that you actually can't rid yourself of. You got to write it and be there and wait for it to subside. And as you subside, you find yourself intimately with God. So God is saying to you, I want to be part of that with you. When you think in terms of the life of Christ and his abandonment, if anybody was going to have abandonment issues, it's God. Because I mean, seriously, he chose 12 people. He hung out with them for a really long time, and then he completely left and disowned him when he needed them the most. And in that quietness, the only thing that he had was God, the Father. And even he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? In his humanity. So it's okay for us to feel that way, to say what we're thinking, feeling, and that aspect of it. But the finishing lines to everything he said, but not my way, your way. Not my way, your way. Not my way, your way. And so then when he gets out of that, what ends up happening is we have a strength in situations that we didn't think we had strength with. If I can handle, it's kind of like, if I can handle this situation or this person in my life, I can handle pretty much anyone, right? But prior to this, I was trying to extricate myself from that person, or I was trying to convince them to give me what I needed. But if we can stay in there and ride that wave, ride that, and learn in that about ourselves, we're onto something. Anybody else? Good reflections. And so, as we take communion, there's a couple things I was thinking as we can think in terms of where we've been before. You're here and alive because of some other situations that you did ride. You did make it through. How about that? Right? We're here sitting thinking about the future and forgetting about the glory of some of the things that we've gotten through. How did you receive? When in those moments when you thought things weren't going to be working out, when you felt a bit lost, when you went through this, and you actually got through as you look back, how did you receive that aspect of it? And at this point, like the Galatians, see, the Galatians got tripped up and their joy was stolen because they thought, okay, I knew I surrendered myself to God, but now I'm going to have to do some of this on my own. No, it never works out that way. You don't get to a point where you're like, okay, now I'm going to do this on my own. No, it's the same principles all the way through this. The same principles. Jesus' response to that was, I do nothing but what the Father tells me. Okay, that's my master. And the final question, will your suffering be in vain? Will your suffering be in vain? Don't let it be. Invest it. Invest that suffering. Invest whatever it is you're experiencing. Invest that into the life that you always wanted that you didn't know you already have. Okay, let me repeat that. Invest it in the life that you've always wanted, the life that you didn't know you already have, even as we sit here. Even as we sit here. Okay? These moments, these quiet moments of communal solitude, if that's possible, that's like an oxymoron. Communal solitude. Experiencing the silence, the voice of God, silence, the voice of God together. And being in this moment and being calmed by this aspect of it. entering into this moment right now as we focus not on ourselves, but on that which is greater than ourselves, God. When we do that, let me tell you what happens. Again, because I went to that conference and I listened to this neurosurgeon say this. But what ends up happening is parts of your brain are stimulated that were never stimulated before when you think outside of yourself. Isn't that interesting? Prayer and meditation moves from the parietal lobes here, which is all about myself, and the warmth of it goes right into here, which is all about thinking outside of myself. That's the purpose of entering into these moments. When you enter into these moments, just for right now, when you enter into these moments, you are saying you are a part of something greater than yourself also. The waves that were here long before I ever arrived, that others have experienced too, and we touch the suffering of someone else and we share in that. And ultimately, that is what the purpose of the message of Jesus is. It's not so that you will believe and have a transaction take place and then you're good to go, like you got an oil change. The divine oil change. It's a recognition that I'm living a human existence that is so glorious sometimes and so sucky at other times, but that I am participating in something beyond myself. And in these moments of consciousness, I can enter in to remind my soul that the Spirit is alive and it defines me, not my feelings. And we do this in this moment. So Jesus had told him, he said, do my cheeks shake when I do this? He said, listen, I know it looks like a Pac-Man, all right? And every time you eat those dots, it's so sacrilegious. I'm sure he's laughing up there. Every time he did this with them, he broke it and he said, you're not only a part of something greater than yourself. He said, I am with you as a part of you. You were made in my image. So do this. Do this as an act of a moment of resting the truth that I got you. That I got you. That the God of this kingdom, in our kingdom, says, you're worried about the Christmas season. How do you think I felt? It's all about me. God's saying, I want you to know you're not alone. Go through the middle of it, and I will never leave you or forsake you. Go on the outside of it, and you're going to be like a kite on a string going all over the place. I still have you, but the flight's really bumpy. Stay close and intimate with me in your conversation, and we do this by breaking the bread. And then he told them, listen, you're going to feel lost at some moments, but I want you to remember that I became that sheep, that lamb, that suffered for you so that I could suffer with you in your humanity. If I wanted to make a whole bunch of little gods, I would have, but I wanted you to experience the glory of this human life, the divine and the human meeting together in union, which is what the message of Jesus is. It's when the union of human and divine meet together. So when we consume these as an act and a practice, we're basically saying we're together, in and out. So I will put on some music, and whenever you would like to come, take a moment at the table and ask yourself, God, you suffered in Christ. I suffer. Can we join our suffering together and make sure we invest it and not let it be in vain?